heart of the old kingdom of Odor, where the sun hit the palace roofs just right in the mornings, and the drums never stopped during the harvest season. The kingdom of Odor was not the largest in the land, but it was one of the most admired, not just because of its tall stone gates or its markets that stretched from the palace road to the riverside, but because of its ruler, King Ojimba, a man known more for his fairness than his crown, a man whose face was leaned with age but whose heart still beat with concern for his people. He had 3 daughters. Princess Adanna was the eldest. Her beauty made men stutter. Skin like polished mahogany, eyes sharp as a hawk's. But with that beauty came pride, the kind that made her walk past servants like there were stones on the path. She loved attention and expected it without asking. If the room wasn't already noticed, of course he did. But he never said a word. He just watched his youngest daughter with eyes that carried both love and worry. Now, as his beard grew whiter and his steps slower, he began to speak more about legacy, about the future of the throne, about marriage. He told his daughters plainly, "It is time. I will not be here forever. The kingdom must know who will sit beside the next ruler." And so the word went out across kingdom, rivers, hills, and valleys, that the 3 daughters of King Ojimba of Odor were ready for marriage. That any prince or nobleman with good standing and strong character could present himself. And they came from far and wide, tall men with deep pockets and smoother tongues. They brought camels loaded with gifts, beads that sparkled like stars, fabrics woven with golden threads. Some came from Adanna's beauty. Others were drawn to Amara's charm. But Adaeze, the moment she stepped into the court, some men would pause, stare, almost smile, but then their noses would twitch, their brows would furrow. One by one, they would find a reason to excuse themselves. She tried to laugh it off. She even joked with the kitchen maids about it. "Maybe I was born with the smell of the soil," she once said, chuckling softly, but inside it stung. And worse than the rejection was how her sisters looked at her, not with sympathy, with relief, as if they say, "At least it is not me." The king watched all of this, silent, but in his silence a seed of sadness had taken root. His kindest daughter, the one whose heart he admired the most, was being left behind and plagued with a smell that is unexplainable. And no one, not even him, knew what to do about it. The first suitor came with so much confidence that the guards said his footsteps shook the palace stones. He wore red velvet lined with silver threads and smelled like sandalwood. When he entered the great hall, he bowed before the king, grinned at Adanna and Amara, then turned to Adaeze. She stood gently, like she always did, hands folded, eyes kind. He smiled, took a step forward, then paused. His nostrils flared. The smile dropped. Another step back, then another. He turned to the king, murmured something about forgetting an urgent matter in his homeland, and left before the roasted yam and palm wine even arrived. The second suitor didn't stay long either, neither did the third or the fourth. Some tried to be polite, others didn't even hide their disgust. One whispered loud enough for half the hall to hear, "Beauty without breath is better than kindness with stink." The guards laughed. So did a few of the councilmen. And from the far side of the hall, Princess Adana covered her mouth as if sniffling a yawn, but her eyes were laughing. Amara, always the more subtle one, leaned in towards Adana and whispered something. Adana chuckled. Adaeze saw it. She always did. She never said anything though. She just smiled, sat back down, and waited until the hall emptied again. Then came the suggestions. Boil bitter leaf, bathe with it for 7 nights, sleep under the moonlight with your body covered in camphor, mix honey with shea butter and rub it behind your ears. Adaeze tried all of them. Every week a new concoction. Every market day she sent her maid to buy more herbs. She drank teas that made her stomach churn. Let herself be smelled with palm oil, crushed mint, and even a few things too strange to name. She went to the river before dawn and sat in silence while the village priestess chanted over her. Still, nothing changed. The smell stayed, sometimes faint, other times stronger, but always there. And the palace began to talk. One maid whispered to another. A guard wrinkled his nose each time she passed. A small boy once covered his nose and said boldly, "That princess smells like burnt beans." His mother scolded him and tried to shush him, but the damage was done already. Adaeze had it. She didn't cry in public. She never did. But the pillow in her room was almost always damp. One afternoon, on her way back from the village square where she had taken food to a sick widow, Adaeze sat under an old tree near the stream to rest. An elderly woman approached her, wrinkled, bent at the waist, with a walking stick that looked older than the tree itself. The woman didn't ask for anything. She just sat beside her. After a long silence, the woman said, "They call you kind." Adaeze nodded slowly. "They said you smell." Adaeze lowered her head. The woman looked straight ahead, eyes unfocused. "That smell is not from the body. No scrub will fix it. It is not of nature." Adaeze blinked. "Then what is it?" The woman didn't answer right away. She tapped the ground with her stick 3 times. "Yours is the kind that comes with people's. When your time comes, you will understand. Until then, walk as you are. Don't change." Before Adaeze could ask another question, the woman stood and walked away. She turned only once and nodded. The nose may turn away, but the heart will always know what is real. That night, Adaeze didn't try a new mixture. She just lay in bed, eyes opened, thinking. But the palace didn't stop laughing. The next suitor didn't even enter the hall. He cut off a whiff of something at the main gate and turned back, shaking his head. The king, once full of hope and eagerness, now sat quietly during the visit. He no longer stood to welcome suitors. He barely looked up when they came in, just nodded and waited for them to leave, which they always did. He began to spend more time in the royal gardens, alone, not even with his advisors. One evening, Adana asked him, Why he looked so tired, he didn't answer. Amara said perhaps he needed more rest. He still didn't answer. But when Adaeze entered with a small basket of oranges she had picked for him, he looked up and smiled. Tiredly, but it was a smile. She placed the basket beside him, bowed, and left without saying a word. That was how she always moved, quietly, gently, like someone who didn't want to disturb the peace. In the village, they called her names. The sweet-smelling shame. One drunk man shouted during market day, "The princess with perfume from the pit." Another joked. Still, she walked the same way, helped the same way, smiled the same way. When a child lost her slippers, Adaeze bought her a new pair. When an old man's roof leaked during the rainy season, Adaeze sent palace guards with wood and straw. When people bowed awkwardly or shifted away, she didn't flinch. And when her sisters mocked her during dining, she didn't flinch. One pointed at her with an annoying glances and exaggerated that she carried a perfume that smells so bad. She simply focused on her food because deep inside her, something said, "Keep going." Even if no one else believed in her anymore. It was after the third festival of the year that the king made a decision. He stood in the palace courtyard, surrounded by elders, nobles, warriors, and townspeople. His voice, though softer than with age, still carried weight. "My daughters are ready for marriage," he said, "and the kingdom must prepare for a future beyond my years." He paused, letting the murmurs settle. To the men of honor, strength, and wisdom who come seeking their hands, let it be known, whoever proves worthy of marrying any of my daughters shall receive half of this kingdom and a seat beside the throne. The news spread like dry harmattan wind. By the time sunrise comes, horses were kicking up dust on the palace road. Caravans came packed with spices, jewels, silk, and gold. Young men stood straighter. Older men cleared their throats louder. Everyone suddenly had a tale of valor to share. Inside the palace, Adana and Amara prepared as if it were another coronation. Adana wore the brightest wrappers, her wrist jingling with brass and beads. She often spoke in proverbs, now like a queen in waiting. Amara sat at her mirror longer than usual, practicing her laugh, adjusting her posture, making sure everything about her said, "I am worthy." And Adaeze, she kept to the garden. She still fed the birds, spoke kindly to the guards, helped the cooks in the morning. Her robes were clean but simple. She didn't change her perfume. She didn't speak louder or laugh longer. She just continued as she always had. And as the suitors arrived, they came with clear intentions. Some brought poems for Adana, others challenged one another in archery and wrestling just to impress Amara. But none of them walked towards Adaeze. In the great hall, she sat beside her sisters like a shadow, present but never acknowledged. At first, she told herself it didn't matter. But after the seventh suitor arrived and never even glanced in her direction, she excused herself quietly from the court and walked down the back garden path where no one would follow. It was on one of those quiet afternoons, just as The sun was leaning westward, and the sky turned soft with evening light, that a man appeared. He was old, bent at the waist, with a faded wrapper tied around his waist, a dusty bag on his back, and two cracked sandals that looked ready to give up. His beard was white, long and tangled, and his eyes, they didn't focus, clouded like milk. He leaned on a wooden staff and took slow, careful steps. The guards shifted. One snarled, "What does this one want? He's not a suitor, that's for sure." Another laughed. But the man didn't flinch. He simply said, "I've traveled far, I need water, and a place to rest my bones." The guards rolled their eyes. "This is a palace, not a beggar's rest." Someone tossed a coin in his direction. It missed. He bent to pick it up, but his back gave a soft crack and he winced. Slowly he turned and began to walk away. He didn't get far. From the garden path came a voice, soft, calm. "Wait!" Adaeze walked up, holding a calabash. "Please," she said, "sit here in the shade." She laid down a folded cloth for him on the bench just by the palace fence, then handed him the calabash filled with cold water. The man took it in both hands and drank slowly, very slowly. She waited. When he was done, she gave him roasted granules wrapped in clean cloth. He smiled. "No one offered me even a kind word since I crossed your kingdom's border," he said. She sat beside him just close enough to show respect, but not too close to overwhelm him. "Sometimes people forget the ground they walk on," she replied. "But the ground never forgets them." The man chuckled. "You speak like someone who has carried more than she should." Adaeze smiled faintly. "Everyone carries something." He turned his cloudy eyes toward her. "You smell like something old," he said. "Not bad, just old." Adaeze lowered her gaze. "Yes, I know," he nodded. "And still you fed me, offered me water, gave me shade. I don't think someone should be judged for their scent," she said, "especially when they are thirsty." The man said nothing for a while. He just looked up at the sky. Birds passed quietly overhead. When he stood to leave, she gave him one last thing, a small necklace made of clay beads. "Take these for protection," she said. He took it, bowed slightly and said, "May you be remembered when others are forgotten." Then he left. No one else noticed. No drums were beating. No one applauded. No one announced her name. But from that day on, something shifted. Adaeze didn't feel different, but the garden seemed quieter. The birds lingered longer. The wind, when it came, carried something softer. And far beyond the palace gates, in the hills where trees grew older than any man, the air whispered, "She has passed the test." The next morning started like any other. Roosters crowed from the village rooftops. The palace servants moved quietly through the corridors. In the main court, Princess Adana was already being adorned with gold bracelets. Amara had chosen a coral necklace that reached just above her waist. There were whispers that yet another prince had arrived, this time from the northern plateau. Everyone was excited, even the king, though weary, managed a half smile when the palace bell rang to announce the prince's entrance. They all stood. As was tradition, the elders lined up. The royal guards strengthened their spears. Adana fixed her headpiece. Amara glanced at her reflection one last time. Then the gates opened and silence fell. There was no convoy, no warriors, no music, just one man. He was tall but thin. He wore simple robes, no embroidery, no chains, no royal crest. His beard was neatly trimmed, his face clean, but it was his eyes that was very sharp, clear, focused, and not with a hint of blindness in them. No one spoke at first. Then a few gasped. "It's him!" One guard muttered under his breath. "The beggar." Some backed away. Some looked confused. The king raised a hand and stepped forward. The man bowed deeply. "I come not with gold or camels," he said, "but with a truth this kingdom has waited too long to see." He stepped to the center of the courtyard. His voice was steady, but his presence carried something heavier than royalty. "Yesterday, I stood at your gate as a beggar, blinded, dirty, rejected. I asked for water, I asked for rest, and only one soul looked at me with compassion. But she is the one you all mocked, the one you hide behind perfumes and whispers gave me water and gave me a shade and spoke to me with kindness." The king's hands were shaking. He looked at Adaeze, still sitting quietly, confused, unsure if this was real or another cruel moment. Then the man did something no one else expected. He knelt before her. "Princess Adaeze," he said, "I am Prince Elendu of the Hidden Realm. A curse was laid upon me by a jealous brother that I would walk the earth unnoticed, unwanted, until one person showed me kindness without knowing who I was." He looked up. Before anyone could speak, he reached out and took her hand. And just like that, everything changed. A wind passed through the courts, not harsh but sudden, gentle and cool, like breath over water. Adaeze gasped, not from pain, but from relief. Her body felt lighter, the heaviness in her chest, the shame, the smell, all gone. Just like that, she brought her hand to her neck. Nothing. Her skin felt clean and fresh, as if the air around her had changed too. There was a light, not from the sun, but from her, a glow that seemed to rise from her skin, soft, golden, calm. The guards stepped back. Some of the elders began to kneel. Even the king held onto the railing beside his throne for support. Adana was staring, mouth slightly open. Amara blinked rapidly, as if trying to believe what was going on was not real. Prince Elendu rose. "This is your true queen," he said. "The one who sees beyond the surface, the one who led without a crown, the one who touched a prince not with her hands but with her heart." The king's eyes welled with tears, not because he was losing a daughter to marriage, but because in that moment he realized what he had almost missed. He walked down the steps slowly and stood before her. "My child," he said softly, "forgive me for all the times I stayed silent." Adaeze nodded. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "You never stopped loving me, Papa." That was enough. From the crowd, someone began to clap, then another, and soon the courtyard was filled with the sound of hands, cheers, and feet stomping in joy. The girl they had ignored, the one they had ridiculed, now stood brighter than the rest. Not because of magic, but because of truth and kindness.